Welcome everybody to another eye-opening episode of Lockdown 23 in 1. Today we're going to be speaking about a story that I covered about a year ago of an inmate dying in an Alabama prison by freezing to death. And when I brought this story y'all's way, I gave y'all some ideas on possibly where this guy could have froze to death in jail. A freezer, outdoor wreck, a cell that's temperature controlled. Those were the three guesses that I made in that video, and one of them was correct. So before we get into the details of this case, I just want y'all to understand, it's not the inmates you have to worry about in a lot of places. It's the COs, correctional officers, deputies, whatever you want to call them. A lot of these guys, man, they have no care in the world for the inmates that they're watching over. As a matter of fact, they come into work with nothing but pure hate towards them. So don't ever think that COs or anybody in a place of position with a uniform is perfect. A lot of those guys should never have been allowed to even fill out an application. And as you can see, I'm filming with a cell in the background. This happens to be a dry cell. Trust me, it's going to play a big role in the story for the day. So if this is what you're into, all things lockup and crime related, then this is where you want to be. Hit that like, subscribe, notification bell before you leave, and check out my playlist with many more videos for you to start watching today. And yes, I put my hat back on. I'm just feeling too naked. Sorry, all you hairdressers. But traveling down to Walker County Jail in Jasper, Alabama, an inmate was tasered and for 14 days kept in a temporary holding cell that was allegedly referred by local sheriff's deputies as the freezer. They had to have used this cell many times in the past to have given it a nickname. But they call it the freezer because of the cold air they would blast into it, according to the lawsuit. Look, I've been in cells just like this, where they are pumping ice cold air into it. Typically, it's in booking when you first come into jail, or if you get in trouble, you go to the side pocket, man. They keep that thing pretty frosty. To the point where you'll take your toilet paper, and instead of using it to wipe your own ass, you much rather get it wet and slam it up into that vent so it stops blowing the air out. Because that's what happens after, you get it wet and soggy and slap it into the vent. It molds inside of it and around it. It's literally airtight. And throughout the night, that air just pumping over it and on it, it solidifies into like a rock. And when inspection time comes around in the morning, the CO's making an obligation to take them all down. Not to mention kick out a few in-house infractions for it as well, depending on where you're at. So I've had plenty of experience with these treacherous vents. The article continues saying that he died of hypothermia. Tony Mitchell's revised death certificate rules that his death was a homicide caused by hypothermia and sepsis, resulting from infected injuries obtained during incarceration and medical neglect. Man, oh man. Last year, Tony's mother, Margaret Mitchell, filed a civil complaint for wrongful death in connection with her 33-year-old son's alleged treatment at the Walker County Jail in Jasper, Alabama. And I would too if it was my child and he went out like that. Unreal. I mean, you got to figure, there's people out here in America getting the death penalty for shooting people. These COs are sitting someone in a cell for 2 weeks. A dry cell, segregated cell for the most part. No mat, no blankets, no pillow, no nothing but concrete steel in that little dusty tear-proof gown. No underwear, no socks, no nothing else. With the AC cranked to the max, right? So he had a slow, painful death, if I were to guess, to die of hypothermia and sepsis. Sepsis is an infection that's left untreated. Torturous way to go, if you were to ask me, So shouldn't all these individuals, if they have the death penalty in that state, get smoked from here to kingdom come? I mean, many others do. I don't know. That's just how my mind works. But the article continues with, I am not sure what circumstances the patient was held in incarceration, but it is difficult to understand a rectal temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit. The emergency room physician wrote around the time of Tony's death in the medical records transcribed into the complaint, adding, I do not know if he could have been exposed to a cold environment. And Tony, believe it or not, was only in jail for a wellness check. Turns out he was having a mental breakdown out in the streets, went to the jail, and I guess they didn't know how to handle him, right? Typically, when people are snapping like that, they might keep them in cells just like this until maybe they get transferred to the psych hospital. I've had actually some homeboys have to go through that type of stuff. And also, these people that aren't in the right state of mind, they'll go in there doing things to correctional officers, and they get pissed. They don't care if they got mental issues or not. They don't like them no more. So they whip them into the freezer. Look, there's inmates that came in with conditions where, like I've told stories in the past, they would just cuss and say rude things to other people uncontrollably. They knew that they couldn't control what they said. It don't matter, man. Inmates, COs, if you start disrespecting that person, they feel some kind of way, they're gonna attack or throw you in the box. Regardless of mental health, man. I'm trying to tell you, I've seen it many times. In a note, the physician wrote that it is difficult to understand why Mitchell's body temperature was so low. Also, instead of medical professionals, the deputies decided to drive Mitchell to the hospital because no one called an ambulance for him, even though he obviously needed medical help, the complaint says. Very strange why they would drive him themselves to the hospital. According to the lawsuit, Mitchell's heart stopped beating before they even made it there that morning. They arrived at the hospital over 5 hours after deputies were captured on video laughing and joking while Tony lay naked on the cement floor of his cell, just like the one you see behind me, in obvious need of emergency medical treatment. And I had a cellie one time that had a hernia, right? And the thing would, every time he'd do push-ups, we would laugh at it because it would bulge out like a big bubble. He'd be like, oh, it's all right, and pop it right back in. Well, one day, I guess it might have ripped a little too much, and this dude was in so much pain it was unreal. He couldn't do no more push-ups. He was bedridden. He was begging to go to the outside hospital. They weren't letting him go until finally one day he was almost at his last straw. They took him to the hospital, got it fixed, and guess what? They put him right back into the same block. And that's what he told us. His name was Jimmy, probably the funniest inmate I've ever met. Shout out to you, my friend. I don't name names too often in my stories because I don't really remember him. So if I remember this guy, you know he had an impact in my life. Either way, he came back and said, look, bro, man, if they waited just another day, I probably would have been dead. You know, so there are situations like this happening all across the country. It doesn't matter where you're at. Medical issues are going unseen on a regular basis. I mean, there's so many of them, not to mention a lot of these inmates, I'm going to tell you the truth, they're lying half the time just to get some pills or whatever, you know, a little extra medical attention or just get the hell out the cell block. But this situation here is unbelievable. That they were captured laughing at this guy just moments before his death. On the evening of February 29th, the crowd rallied outside the sheriff's office demanding justice for Mr. Mitchell. In a previous statement made to the news, Goldfarb described what happened to Mitchell as the worst case of inmate abuse he's ever seen. I don't know exactly who that is. Maybe that's the name of the medical examiner, but either way, man, you know, someone has to pay. And I'm talking about both ways, monetarily and physically. If someone don't sit in a cell behind this one, especially the CO sitting there laughing at them, then I'm just going to lose even more hope in the system that I already have little in.
In a written statement, Sheriff Nick Smith said tonight he has been dedicated to transparency, providing all video footage and documents to the FBI and SBI. He said the recently completed autopsy brings us closer to uncovering the truth. The full autopsy, though, those details have not been shared with us.
But my condolences go out to the family members, and hopefully they get their justice, man, as well as all the other families that we've been reporting on within months. It's getting really crazy inside of jail. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. I got plenty more content coming your way, but more importantly than anything, y'all be easy, be safe, and stay free.